Hello, hi again. Hello, English readers, and welcome to the live reading of the graded reader adaptation of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. I'm Lydie, and I'm an English teacher in France. I'm also the founder of Lydie's Book Club, in which I host live readings of adaptations of classics of English literature like this one, and contemporary novels as well. I tend to prioritize books that are written by women. And once a week, I meet the members of my book club with via Zoom to discuss the chapters read over the week. And we also talk about books in general and learning English. And for this new live read along, I have added 3 live workshops. So in addition to the 12 live reading sessions that I'm going to host live on Instagram, and that will be accessible on Lydie's Book Club YouTube channel, I will also host 3 live workshops on 3 different Saturdays. You can find all the dates in the description of this video. Or in the description of the podcast, because all the live readings will now be accessible on YouTube and also on Spotify, as I found out that it's also very nice to be able to just listen and to a reading. And I find Spotify very user-friendly when you are in a car and listening to an audio, and you're not distracted. You don't want to be distracted by the video. So you will find all the dates in the description. And the first session is going to be held this Saturday at 9 a.m. Paris time. And we will discuss chapters 1 to 5 so we will discuss these chapters, and this way you'll be able to practice your English and improve as well. To have access to these 3 live workshops, you have to be a member of the book club. So make sure you subscribe. You go to the link in bio or to the link in the description of this video, and you click on Lydie's Book Club .com, and you can subscribe to the book club to have access to the live and be a member of the book club, because those workshops will be free for the members. Okay. And if you're not able to become a member, then don't worry, these 3 live workshops will be accessible as well as a one-off payment on my website from the 10th of June, I think. So you will get all the information about that later on. Okay, so make sure you have subscribed to the newsletter, because this way you get all the information about the upcoming live workshops or live readings. That's it. And today we are going to read chapter 3. So we've just read chapter 2 at 1 p.m. because yesterday I wasn't able to do chapter 2, sorry. So we're doing 2 chapters today. And now this is chapter 3 that we're going to read together. And if you would like to know more about Charlotte Bronte's life and Jane Eyre, I invite you to listen to the podcast episode 20, an introduction to Charlotte Brontë and Jane Eyre. It is this episode that you can see in the playlist of the Jane Eyre live reading. live read along. Sorry. So, which it is also accessible on YouTube and Spotify. Right. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of chapter 3. Chapter 2, sorry, I'm getting mixed up. So chapter 2 is Jane remembering her time at Lowood. So as I mentioned in the previous lives, in the previous live readings, Jane Eyre is a novel in which Jane, the main character, is recollecting her memories from childhood up to womanhood, adulthood. She's writing in the present day. She's writing when she's about 30 years old. We are the story is set in the 19th century, England, Yorkshire more specifically, and Jane Eyre is writing her journal, and she's talking about she's starting the journal with her time as a child. In chapter 1, we learned about the fact that her parents died, that she's an orphan, and that she stayed at her aunt, Mrs. Reed, with her 3 cousins who were very mean to her and are abusing her and bullying her. So that was chapter 1. And then at the end of chapter 1, Mrs. Reed take the decision to send her away to a girls' boarding school in Lowood, where she would stay indefinitely. She would not want her to come back over the Christmas holidays or over any holidays, or and neither on weekends. So she's sent there as her new home. And that was all about chapter 2. We learned how she spent her days at Lowood. We learned about the living conditions that are very hard. So Jane is experiencing hunger, cold, and disease, typhus. She does not catch the typhus, but her friend Helen Burns, well, she doesn't really catch the disease, but many girls in the school caught it and they died from it. And Helen Burns has a very weak condition, and she's probably a little bit affected by the disease as well. And she dies at only 13 years old or something. And yeah, 13 years old. And Jane is 10, and she is next to her dear friend when she dies. And there is a beautiful illustration here that shows here Jane in the arms of Ellen Burns on her bed, and she's there. She's there to experience her last days, her last hours, and before she died. Yeah, so it's a very emotional passage, and it shows how hard life was for Jane, especially as a child. She's only 10 years old, and she's already went through a lot. The death of her parents, the harsh condition, well, the bullying and the rejection she's experiencing at her aunt's house, at her aunt's house, yes, and then she goes to Lowood, and again she is mistreated, although the teachers, especially one, I think it's Miss Miller, or that they don't talk much in this adaptation. They don't talk much about the teachers, but there is one teacher in particular who is very kind, and she's trying her best to accommodate it, to make the living condition a little bit better. But Mr. Brocklehurst, who is the director or the headmaster of the school, makes sure that the girls don't have too much food to eat, and wears those brown dresses, very plain, very simple, and not very warm clothes, especially for the winter. So she's welcoming spring very impatiently, because she's very excited about springtime, warmer weather, and Mr. Brocklehurst, another good news, as along with the nice weather coming, arriving, Mr. Brocklehurst is asked to leave the head, the directory of the school, because of the typhus pandemic, and the horrible living condition was also known by members of the government, etc. So not the government, sorry, but about health institutions, more like. So these people are going to do some research and investigate why so many girls have died in this institution, and Mr. Brocklehurst is going to be sent to another school, but sent away. So better days are coming. And we learned that Jane stayed in Lowood for another 6 years as a student and another 2 as a teacher. So she spends most of her life, so 8 years in this institution as a pupil and then as a teacher. But then at 19, she wants more, and she wants to explore the world or outside Lowood, because her life has been confined in this institution, and she's never been further to Lowood, so she would like to engage at home. So she wants to see life and to explore, have a new experience, a life experience. So this is the whole new adventure that we're going to learn about in chapter 3. So let's get started, and it's called New Start. Okay. I wanted to be in a new house with new faces, and so I advertised for work as a governess in the Herald newspaper. Remember, Charlotte Brontë as well was a governess when she before she became a successful writer. She was a governess, then became a teacher in Brussels, and then found success with her writings. So you can clearly see a very close inspiration to her own life, to Charlotte's own life as a woman, and so many similarities with their life experiences, like Lowood, the boarding school where her two sisters died when she was only 8 years old. So all these elements, or these little clues that you find in the text are very sweet, and it really is interesting to kind of assimilate Jane Eyre's life experiences with Charlotte. So it gives kind of a little insight of Charlotte's life and way of thinking through Jane Eyre. So let's start again. I wanted to be in a new house with new faces, and so I advertised for work as a governess in the Herald newspaper. The following week, a letter came from a Mrs. Fairfax at Thornfield Hall. She was looking for a governess to teach a little girl. She was looking for Thornfield Hall was near the town of Millcote, 70 miles south of Lowood. I wrote a letter to Mrs. Fairfax about my work at Lowood. Mrs. Fairfax wrote back the next week and gave me the job. I decided to write to Mrs. Reed to tell her my new address, but she did not write back to me. Mrs. Reed is her aunt. Very mean aunt. I excitedly began to get ready for the journey. On my last day, I had a surprise visit from Bessie. So remember, Bessie was the servant, Mrs. Reed's servant, and she was the only servant that was nice to her. Life was difficult at Gateshead, she told me. John Reed was behaving badly, and he was spending a lot of his mother's money. Mrs. Reed was very unhappy about it. John Reed is her cousin, who would beat her, hit her, and abuse her. So now, and her mother would let him do it. So he got away with so many things, and it seems like he keeps on getting away with things and abusing her mother now. Did she send you here, Bessie? I asked. No, she replied. I've wanted to see you for a long time. When your aunt got your letter, and I heard that you were going to a different part of the country, I thought I must come to see you. I have to tell you something. Bessie continued. One day, nearly 7 years ago, your father's brother, Mr. Eyre, came to Gateshead and asked to see you. When he heard that you were 50 miles away, he was very unhappy. He was going to live in Madeira, and his ship was sailing the next day. He wore nice clothes and looked like he was quite rich, but Mrs. Reed did not like him very much. She never wrote to you about his visit, did she? No, I replied slowly. Bessie and I talked for another hour, And then she had to go. The next morning, I left for Thornfield Hall. Thornfield Hall is now the new place where Jane is going to start working as a governess for this little girl. The journey to Millcote by carriage took 16 hours. It was autumn, and I was very cold when I finally arrived late in the evening. At Millcote, I was met by a man called John, who drove me in a smaller carriage to Thornfield. As we left the lights of the town behind, I began to feel worried. Was Mrs. Fairfax like Mrs. Reed? We passed the church, and I saw the lights of a village ahead. After 2 hours, John got down and opened some gates, and in front of us stood a huge stone house. I could see the light of the candle in one of its windows. The other windows were dark. We stopped in front of the house, and a young woman, a servant, came out and led me inside. I followed her into a small, comfortable room with a bright fire. A grey-haired woman sat in front of it, but she stood up and came forward when I entered. "How are you, my dear?" she said in a kind voice. "I'm Mrs. Fairfax. You must be very cold. John drives so slowly." "This is Leah," she said, and she pointed to the servant. "She will take your bags to your room. Now come to the fire while I get you some food." Okay, so here there is a lovely illustration of Jane here, the young Jane, and Mrs. Fairfax. Very nice, very kind, Mrs. Fairfax. "I feel like a guest, not a governess," I thought, happily after she went out. "I wasn't expecting this." She came back a few minutes later with a tray of sandwiches. "Will I see Miss Fairfax tonight?" I asked. "Miss Fairfax?" she said, and then she smiled. "Oh, you mean your student? Miss Barnes. You will meet her tomorrow. Oh, it will be nice to have a friend here. I get quite sad sometimes. The nights can be very long. But little Adele came here in the autumn. And now you are here too. I shall be quite happy." I felt very happy too when I heard these words. "But you have had a long journey and you must be very tired," she said. We can talk more tomorrow." I woke the next morning in a bright little bedroom with large windows and blue curtains. It was very different to the grey walls of Lowood. I put on a black dress and walked out into a long corridor. It led me to some stairs and down into a huge hall with open doors. Outside, it was a beautiful autumn morning. I went outside and looked up at Thornfield Hall. It had 3 floors, and around it was a garden and large fields. "How do you like Thornfield?" said a voice, and I turned to see Mrs. Fairfax. She smiled at me. "I like it very much," I replied. "Yes, it is a pretty place," she said, "but Mr. Rochester should visit it more. Great houses need their owners." "Mr. Rochester," I said. "Who is he?" "I thought that you owned Thornfield." She laughed loudly at that. "Oh, what a strange idea! I just look after the house. Mr. Edward Rochester owns Thornfield Hall. And the little girl, my student," I asked. "Her parents are dead, and she is now Mr. Rochester's ward. And here Adele comes now with her nurse." So a ward is a word meaning that a child that Mr. Rochester has in protection. So he is the legal guarant. I forgot the term, sorry, but he is. Hi, Melissa. He is now legally responsible to her, and she's in his care, basically. And so you can see how confused is Jane when she learns that actually Mrs. Fairfax is not the owner of Thornfield. She's not but she is actually a servant, even if she has a higher position. She's between the governess probably and let's say that she has the same rank as a governess. Yeah, she's the housekeeper, basically. I'm good. And you, Melissa, how are you? Thank you for joining this live. Okay. I turned to see a little girl running up the garden, followed by a young nurse. The girl was about 7 or 8 years old, with a pale face and long brown hair. Good morning, Miss Adele, said Mrs. Fairfax. Come and speak to your teacher. C'est là, ma gouvernante, said the girl to her nurse, pointing at me. Her nurse replied in French. Adele was born in France and only came here 6 months ago with her nurse, Mrs. Fairfax explained. She can only speak a little English. But you were taught French at Lowood, so you will understand her well, I hope. So the little girl said, "Oh, this is my governess," to her nurse, and she speaks French to her nurse. So you might hear some French sentences in this. Well, there are a lot of French sentences in the original book, so it's quite lovely to read and to see as well how. But that shows as well that Charlotte Brontë learned French and knew French as well. She also knew some German. So in her novel, The Professor, there are a lot of French sentences in the text, because the story is happening in Brussels and in north of France, some parts of the north of France. So it's quite lovely to read some French in the text. Okay, let's continue. After breakfast, Adele and I went to the library. She was a good student, but lessons were new for her, and she could not sit down for long. When noon came, I sent her back to her nurse. I decided to do some drawing and started walking towards my bedroom to get my pencils. While I was going upstairs, Mrs. Fairfax called up to me. "Have your morning lessons finished?" I turned back and found her in a beautiful room with tall paintings and a huge window. "What a beautiful room," I said, "and you keep it so tidy even when no one is living here." "This is the drawing room. It is cleaned every day because I never know when Mr. Rochester is coming," she explained. "He always expects this house to be ready for him." "Do you like him?" I asked. "Oh, yes," she replied. "All the land around here has belonged to the Rochesters for years. People like him, but he's a bit strange. I never know when he's joking and when he is being serious. He has traveled and seen a lot of the world. We left the drawing room and she showed me the rest of the house. We went through the rooms at the front of the house, and then I followed her up some stairs and along a long corridor. The rooms on the second floor were smaller with older furniture. Do the servants sleep in these rooms? I asked. No, she replied. John and his wife, Mary, sleep at the back of the house. So does Leah. So those are the other servants. No one sleeps in these rooms. Just then, there was a strange laugh from the attic above our heads. So the attic is at the very top of the house of any house. Well, some houses, and there is it is a place where you would put old boxes, and it's very dusty usually. So this is the attic. Mrs. Fairfax, did you hear that laugh? I said. Who was it? Yes, I heard it, she replied. It was Grace Poole. She sews in the attic. Sometimes Leah stays in the attic with her. Then she shouted, Grace! I heard feet coming downstairs from the attic. Then the door nearest me opened, and a woman came out. She was between 30 and 40 and had a hard, plain face. So not very plain means sort of it's not ugly, but kind of someone that is not very beautiful. Yeah. Too much noise, Grace, said Mrs. Fairfax. The woman nodded her head and went upstairs again. When we finally went back downstairs, Adele came running to meet us, and we went into Mrs. Fairfax's room, where our dinner was ready for us. And that's the end of chapter 3. So I hope that you enjoyed this live reading, and I hope that you enjoy as well this novel and getting into this world of Jane Eyre and about her sad story, and that you are quite curious to know how her life is going to evolve. Hi, hello Elise, how are you? I hope you're having a good time. I hope you enjoyed this live reading, and make sure as well to subscribe to the book club if you're interested in learning English through reading and discussions, and that you are interested in improving your English as well, and to be able to have access for free to the 3-part workshop of Jane Eyre, then make sure you join us. And remember, the first session will be this Saturday, so you better join now, and I will make sure that I answer also any of your questions. If you also have any questions about the book club or anything, then leave me a message, a private message, or an email. Either way is fine with me. And I will see you tomorrow for the reading of chapter 4 of this graded reader adaptation of Jane Eyre. Have a beautiful end of the day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Bye-bye.